What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is Bull Season 4, Episode 13, Child of Mine. Whew, what a good episode. I'll admit, the scenario itself, I honestly couldn't even imagine. It was one of those, as I'm going throughout the entire episode and I'm watching, I'm just thinking, my god, there's no bad guy in this. Everybody just wants to take care of the kid. They want what's best for the kid, but also, there's a little bit of we think we're what's best for the kid, so it's a difference of opinion. But man, could you even imagine? First of all, imagining having to go through the idea that you can't have kids normally, so you have to do this artificial insemination thing, and then all of a sudden the baby comes out and it's different. It's not the baby you were expecting. That would be a little bit weird, and I'm glad though. I was really worried whenever that first happened. I was really worried there was gonna be this huge thing about, oh well, you just don't love the baby because he's black, and I don't know. I was really expecting it to go there because I feel like a lot of other shows would have, but I'm glad no. They showed the parents really love the kid, even though it did come out black. It didn't really matter to them. It's like, yes, the clinic made a mistake, but it's still our kid, and we're still gonna take care of it and love it as if it's our kid. Said it as if it's not a human being, but we're gonna love him as if he's our own, even if the sperm doesn't match what we were promised. So I'm glad that they really pushed that aside, and aside from the father talking a little bit about, well, you got to be a black family to raise a black kid, which admittedly did, I think, get painted in a bit of a negative light as far as that topic is concerned in this episode, which I think is good because race really shouldn't factor in. Yes, obviously the parents of the kid, that's kind of the main talking point of the episode. But I was really worried just because of the fact that, yes, the two sets of parents are different colors of skin. That was going to be something really big, really focused on. And it was just more of one or two scenes and it was sort of brushed away. And I feel like that's kind of what I prefer because race really shouldn't define who you are as a person because we're all human. So I never understood that topic of conversation of oh no, we're proud to be the color that we are. Why? Literally, it's just the melatonin in your skin. It colors what type of skin you are. How does that define you? It's what you look like. It's not at all who you are. So I always hate those topics of conversation whenever they get into that realm. So, but yeah, overall though, it really was interesting to see what exactly was going to happen next. Because there's a lot of different moving pieces in this episode that it's really hard to figure out which way it's going to go. Because on the one hand, you do feel like the parents that, Taylor's friend, you feel like they are the good guys in this scenario because, well, they were the ones that were told incorrect information, the clinic messed up for their kid, and they are taking care of this kid as best as they can, and they did so much just to have this kid in the first place. They went through so much to have the kid in the first place. And then this other family comes in and you're thinking, oh, how dare you try to take their kid away. But then you listen to them and you're like, actually, I kind of feel bad for them too because they can't have kids either. They were not expecting his DNA to get put into the wrong place. So it's not like it's their fault, but they still feel like they also should be able to care for this kid since it's part him. And that makes sense. And on top of that, they clearly are wealthy enough to take care of this kid, more wealthy than our original family. So it's like, yes, the kid would probably grow up in a better lifestyle, a more, I guess, comfortable lifestyle, which is not always necessarily, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a better life, but on paper it seems like he would. So it really raised a lot of questions, and it really did a good job of making both families seem sympathetic and clearly good people. They're not these jerks. Even when they brought up the nanny that the Waltons were looking at, it wasn't like, oh, how dare you? Oh, well, we don't have the time all the time, but that doesn't mean we're not gonna take care of the kid. The nanny will take it. They did it mainly because they knew they were gonna be working a lot, but it was still from a place of we will get the best nanny and we will make sure the kid is taken care of when we're not around, but we will be around as much as we can be. So yeah, I just really liked how they set up this episode. Even at the beginning, I thought it was going to end up being something where they have to take the clinic to trial, and it's like, well, how do you... They still get the kid, so how do you paint them in a good light, where it's like, well, they still have this kid that they love and they're going to take care of. So I thought that was going to be the main topic of conversation. Is like, well, why are you still trying to attack the clinic just because they made a small mistake? Like, does that mean you think the kid is any less because of the mistake? But as it turned out, like, that was a very simple trial for them to get through. It was the what's the term? The custody of the kid that became the main talking point. And I do feel like that really was a lot more of a dramatic case because of all the different things. And again, making this other family, making this father and mother very sympathetic and very good people to combat against our also good people. So, and the ending as well, I think, was well earned. It was justified. The fact that, Bull kind of realized what the middle ground is, since they were both trying to take care of the kid, but they couldn't really see each other's side. Because honestly, I did kind of wonder why they couldn't understand each other's point of view a bit earlier, because as they were talking behind the scenes and as they were talking in the courtroom, it definitely felt like both sides wanted what was best for the kid and wanted to be there, and they both had this feeling of, why would I not be there for this kid that has my DNA? Like, why would I not be there to support this kid? And it's like, okay, so you both see that, right? And yet you can't see that the other person feels the same way. So, but the fact that Bull came up with this idea for them to have another kid using her egg and his sperm again, and essentially both kids being taken care of by both families, I thought that was a very nice resolution, and it definitely... It came to the most amicable of resolutions that left both families equally as happy, in my opinion. Like, yes, there's a feeling of, well, I would like to still be a big part of their life. It's like, well, you can be, but you also have your own kid now that you can take care of too. Something about that just, it seems right, and I don't know. I like the fact that they came to such a nice resolution. I was really worried that at some point there would be something, like either one of them, there would be something about them that it's like, oh, they lied about this, or oh, they're actually not that good of a person. So the fact that that twist never came and it just essentially resolved where nobody was upset, everybody was happy, I like that, because that's... I wasn't expecting that for part of the episode. I was kind of expecting one family would get what they want and the other wouldn't, and I was really worried just because it's not the outcome I wanted. So, yeah, I mean, maybe a little sappy, maybe a little too everything's okay, everything is awesome type of ending, but sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need to feel like things in the world are good. Not everything is shit. Especially where we are today. But anyways, that's it for this first episode. On to the second one. I'll see you there. And now episode 14, Quid Pro Bono. Another good episode. A really sweet finish too, with Bull being able to finally have his kid, and of course the 88 dropping the charges. All of it was pretty well put together. I do think, because I didn't talk about it in the last episode, because honestly it was just such a good finale for how all that came together. I did forget to talk about the one part of the episode that maybe was a little... I don't know, there are some moments in some of these cases where I do feel like the prosecutor or the defense attorney, whichever one Bull and his team are going against, they bring up a point, and it's always played for like a, holy crap, they've got a good point, I can't believe they just made that point, and it feels like the jury's against us now. And there are some times that I do feel like I think most people probably wouldn't react to the way the jury is. So in the last episode, the one that I'm thinking of is whenever the attorney for the other family brought up the dad, which his name I forget now. She brought up his like anger management issues and like the fact that he had an abusive dad. And what's the reason why I wasn't really sure how I felt about it is because a lot of it didn't make a lot of sense. You know, like he was seeing a therapist, which he had an abusive dad, and he wanted to make sure that cycle didn't continue, so it makes sense. And apparently he did have 2 blow-ups where he broke something, he got into a fight, and he punched a hole in a wall. One was in college, and one when he was 16. And he's like in his 30s, so I'm thinking, that doesn't really work towards your point, because he hasn't had any recent blow-ups. and he's been seeing a therapist to prevent making sure that he has, any blow-ups. So I feel like that point wasn't really made, but they tried to make it seem like, God, that was such a good point. The judge is going to be seeing her side now. In this one, the one point that made me feel that way is whenever the prosecutor is talking about him going to college and being like, I mean, you're sitting amongst all of these people who are making, like, what? they have 1520s on their SAT scores. They all had 4.0 unweighted GPAs, and you're sitting there on a 1400 and a 3.3. And here's the thing, like, yes, maybe there could be some people that would be suspicious of that, like the mom. The mom clearly thought she's not, like, she wasn't surprised. She thought there might be something that the father did behind her back. But from his point of view, from the son's point of view, I don't really feel like blaming him for not realizing that there was something weird about him getting into Hudson. I don't think that really works, because he's still just a kid. Like, yes, he's going into college, but he's still just a kid. Most high schools don't prepare kids for college very well. They don't know what they're getting into. They don't understand all the ins and outs of the schools. They don't understand, the politics of the schools. What is the entry level college? What is a college that accepts higher ranking people? What are those standards? They don't really get that. I think, honestly, good example of that recent Marvel movie is Spider-Man No Way Home. I honestly thought that scene where he's talking to the dean and it's just like, wait, I could have just called? Like, that is hilarious because, yeah, most kids don't realize the school just rejected you. I guess that's it then. No, you can call. You can fight it. You can argue that they don't have grounds to do that. I can do that. Most kids aren't going to realize this. So blaming this kid for not realizing that, oh, I got into this prestigious university off of my dad paying for it, and I should have, I should know, because looking around, all these kids seem smarter. Like, not only is he not going to know about the standard of the school, but also, how are you going to look around and be like, oh yeah, that kid looks like he got a 1500 on his SAT, and that one looks like he's definitely a 4.0 GPA. You're not going to know that by looking at the kids. Like that, I don't know. So that argument for me just fell a little flat, but again, they did make it seem like oh, what a good point. And I just didn't really agree with that. The other thing in this episode that was a little weird, but I mean, I'm glad that they tied it together pretty well. I kind of figured out that the defense attorney that they were talking to at the beginning of the episode, the defendant, I kind of figured he had something to do with paying off this juror. But I will say, looking back on it, I am kind of wondering what happened here, because they made it seem like, oh, well, he clearly paid her off when she got into the jury. But when did that happen? How did he do that? Because when they started the trial, she was very much like, he's clearly guilty. Like, the way she was looking at him, she thought he was guilty. And then she looked bored once Bull left. And then all of a sudden he comes back and she's like super invested, trying to get everybody around to be like, oh yeah, he's not guilty, clearly. So what was the cycle of events? So at first she was invested and she was looking at him like he was guilty. And then did she like make up her mind that he was guilty, so she was done with the trial? And then all of a sudden that's when this guy steps in and bribes her to make her, convince everybody that he's not guilty. Like, I feel like they didn't do a good job of explaining the cycle of events. And if he did bribe her during the trial, when did that happen? And how did he get access to her to let her know, hey, here's what I want you to do? Because most of the time these juries are very secluded from everything else going on. At least most of the time. I think there might be like some jury pools that they don't have to worry about that because it's not as high profile of a case, but I'm pretty sure this one was pretty high profile. So I feel like the jury pool would have been, or the jurors would have been a lot more secluded and not have as much access to the outside world. So I don't know. Just a couple questions there that I feel like did bring this episode down a little bit, but overall I still really enjoyed it. I thought it was well handled. The stuff with this doctor, yeah, it is one of those where you do feel for the guy and you want to see him be okay at the end, because it's not really his fault. Just because his dad did something behind his back that was illegal doesn't mean he should take the blame for what his dad did. And of course, they want somebody to pay, and they still feel like, well, you still didn't get your schooling correctly, but he still went through the school. He still did do everything when he was there. So it does feel a little unjust to take all of that away from him just because his dad got him into the school illegally. So it is kind of one of those. It's a bit of a flip of the coin whether or not somebody's going to take offense to that, and somebody's going to try to say, oh, well, by the letter of the law, this is illegal, so you're going to be, facing criminal charges for this. It is one of those. In real life, he might actually pay for it. It just kind of depends on whether or not you get somebody that's going to be a stickler for the rules, or somebody who's going to be a little bit more understanding of the extenuating circumstances. So, but yeah, all in all, another solid episode. So on to the final of these three. I'll see you there. And now episode 15, Flesh and Blood. So this, for me, is a good example of what I was talking about in the one episode, I think it was episode 10, where we had all these very interesting stories with, the girl being stalked by a guy who's very good at technology, the judge that doesn't like Bull because of something that happened in the past, wanting him out of the courtroom, and also, Marissa having to be in the courtroom, and also Taylor dealing with this guy that's not answering her. All these interesting stories that I wanted to see maybe a little bit more time spent on, but they were all sort of cut off a little bit because they had to give away time to some other also interesting story. In this, I feel like this is a good example of how to tell two stories which on their own may not work as well, but because they're both happening at the same time, I feel like it adds a little bit extra weight to it. Because the case itself is just a very straightforward whodunit mystery. We know it wasn't the daughter because she was upstairs, so unless they pull some switcheroo and it's like, oh, we didn't see the scene where she hits him, it was most likely not going to be her, so it was just about figuring out who could have done it. I like the twist that it's not the one guy that wanted money from her. And honestly, it was also a nice feeling for her, and I even had the thought where, when I thought it was him, I'm like, well, I wonder if they'll try to argue that she's still responsible since he was killing the dad to get the money from her. So the fact that it wasn't him and it turns out to be this whole story with this illegitimate son that he had, I thought it was a nice little twist. But on its own, maybe not the most interesting. There aren't very many twists and turns. It's the one guy as a suspect, and then we get to finding out about this woman who also might have a reason to want him dead. And that was basically it. But then on top of that, you throw this extra story where Benny's appendix explodes, which sounds a lot worse than it actually is now that I think about it. But yeah, dealing with the burst appendix, now he's out of commission and Chunk has to step in on his very first murder trial. That's a little bit of extra weight, a little bit of extra tension to it that makes what it would have been a fairly straightforward whodunit mystery into now Chunk's got to take on his first case, his first real murder case as first chair. That's pretty good setup. I like that setup, and it gets me a little bit more invested. Whereas the other episode that I was talking about earlier, all these things probably could have filled up most episodes on its own. Maybe not the Taylor thing, that was just a very straightforward, he got the numbers wrong, or he couldn't read the numbers right. But at the beginning, there was kind of an intrigue of, is there something else going on with him that he's not responding to her texts or calling her back or anything? So maybe not that story, but the other stories I felt like could have filled up most of the episodes on their own. So just a little bit of an interesting, I guess, from my point of view, kind of an interesting connection there. But yeah, all in all, this was another really solid episode. Don't think there was much that stood out as like really, really good or really, really bad. I did like the scene at the end when Benny's talking about, what are you talking about? I'm back. I only have one appendix to lose and it's gone. So, yeah, I'm ready to go. And Chunk trying to, you sound congested. I think he sounds congested. I think he needs to take some more time. I thought that was a funny little scene. But yeah, all in all, 3 more good solid episodes. This season's been really fantastic so far, and I'm glad that this show has really seemed to find its footing. They seem to have a good team dynamic right now. I'm sure at some point the team dynamic will switch up a little bit. We see probably some team members leaving at some point, or maybe some falling out. I did think there was going to be a little bit more tension with Taylor after the one episode this season that she sort of went behind Benny's back, but we haven't really even seen any of that. So, but right now, I feel like maybe it took a little too long because it's season 4 and we're just now feeling like the team is getting their base and working together well, and there's a lot of good chemistry and bouncing off of each other. So maybe taking 4 seasons to get there is a little too long. Like, I feel like this is something where you build this team for 2, maybe 3 seasons, 2.5 seasons, and then that's when you start, okay, we've built the base, we've got the team working together well, we see how good they work together. Now let's start to throw some kinks into the system. Let's start to throw a few wrenches into some of the relationships. Maybe some people get angry with each other. Maybe some inner office relationships start, and that causes a little bit of drama. But it feels we're not there yet. We're not at that point yet. So I'm sure we'll probably see that maybe next season, possibly. I don't really know what to expect for next season, just because I know it's going to be probably a lot of COVID stuff. I am, the more I've thought about it, I am kind of curious to see, just because I know things are going to be a little bit different in the way the courts are run with the whole COVID thing going on. So I do wonder how they're going to handle that. Like, people are going to be wearing masks, so is Bull going to be able to read their facial expressions under the mask? Probably not as well. People are going to be more distant, so it's not like Bull's going to be able... Honestly, they might limit the number of people, so Bull might not even be able to make it into the courtroom itself. So, yeah, that is something I will be curious to see, even though I'm not excited to get back into the whole COVID craze, and we gotta be careful, and oh my gosh, so scary. But, it is something that happens, so I guess we gotta talk about it at some point. But anyways, with all that being said, though, that's about it for these 3 episodes. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on these 3 episodes? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all the good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Bull reviews, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Peace out.